I found out today that you are 6 years in Canada.
Indeed.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So how does a person born in Brazil make their way to little Kamloops working for a tech startup being a technical product manager? Walk me through that little journey.
Yeah. That's a good question. I think, so I've always had the dream of studying abroad, right? Obviously being born and raised in Brazil, lived there until 16 years of age. And as I was concluding high school, it was really clear to me that I just wanted to have the experience to go study abroad somewhere. I thought I had the dream of living abroad and setting up, my livelihood elsewhere. But I really just wanted to give it a shot, even if I didn't know yet if it was going to be like a forever thing. And so I started looking, and different universities in different countries. I moved up and lived in Texas for a few months with some family that I have who lives there, and that was an interesting experience. And I decided that Canada was just the place to be. I had visited before, and I just knew people were very friendly, and Canada is a very open country immigration-wise, so it just made a ton of sense. Started attending some fairs, eventually found out about TRU, among other universities. I made my list and decided to apply for all of them, and TRU was the one who said yes first. And so that was the only way I could get here in time to start my classes, kind of in the timeline that I had, and I figured, hey, I'll give it a shot. If I think Kamloops isn't a great place to be, I can always transfer elsewhere. And so that's how I ended up in Canada. And then how I ended up here working at Vivacity, that's another wild several years. But I guess from an early age, I started working as a freelance web developer when I was 13. And so at that point, I knew that this is what I wanted to do with my life in general, working with technology and software development. But imagine a 13-year-old kid walking up to you and asking for $100 to build your company a website, right? It's like, okay, kid, just give me a lemonade and go away, And so I always had this kind of chip on my shoulder to somehow build a portfolio that would make you reconsider and look at other products beyond just my lemonade. So I feel like that really helped kind of put me in the position to be able to do what we do at Vivacity today, which is pretty much never having a good idea exactly what I'm doing or how I'm going to do it, but just kind of having to do it anyways. And I feel like that's been a skill set, that ability to just learn, and especially under maybe some high stress situations where things need to be done by a certain time and you don't know how, really help develop that skill set, which I think is super useful for what we do, and having more support and more expertise in the team members that I can rely on and all of that. Having grown up not having that and having to kind of make up for it in other ways, and then now going to having an excellent team and all the resources and support that we can need. It's just been an ideal scenario. So I guess short answer is, a lot of university marketing, a little bit of luck, some elements of coincidence, and just a lot of gratitude after all of that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. You mentioned something in there about like uncertainty, and if I was to sort of look at your life, and maybe I'm projecting here a little bit, but it seems to me that you've embraced a lot of uncertainty in your life. Moving country, moving to then another country, going to university you really didn't know particularly well, going to a company you really don't know particularly well, and then developing a product that there's a lot of uncertainties. How do you overcome that certain uncertainty, and how do you feel about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely see your point in terms of uncertainty, permeating a few of the different things I've done in life. But what's surprising to me is that uncertainty, when it's conscious, to me is incredibly scary and anxiety inducing, and it still is to this day. So generally I'd go about, my day just trying to minimize the number of uncertainty. Like when I'm making plans with friends and they're like, oh yeah, let's do like 6 or 6:30. I'm like, 6 or 6:30. Let's make a decision, guys. No uncertainty. But then in life, I guess, it wasn't always an option not to have that uncertainty. And when I was younger, I remember thinking, it's like, okay, by the time I'm like 25, I'll have a pretty good idea of what I'm doing. And then now, we're getting up there and it's like, I think I was wrong. So recently it's been a lot more learning how to embrace that on a day-to-day. And I think a big shift in perspective for me was going from more of a perfectionist mindset of I need to do this because I need to prove who I am or why I'm worth it or whatever it might be, to a mindset of, well, I'm here, let's just make the most of it. That's much more kind of emergential in the sense that it emerges from the context that I find myself in, as opposed to the way I would like others to perceive me in a particular setting. So it's been mostly just learning to embrace it, and there's a huge element of having an environment that supports that, which is thanks to you and thanks to the rest of the team. I feel like we're very, very open. We have been from the start of, you guys know that I have no idea what I'm doing, right? And it's like,
what?
Yeah. Maybe some bad timing, but yeah, we were very open about that from the start. And I never felt, the imposter syndrome, I guess, of having to somewhat hide or, walk on eggshells to try and somehow protect that. And it's just been a much more constructive environment where I've been able to learn a ton more than I feel like if I was still trying to hold on to that perfectionism. It's almost like a shield in a way, right? And it's heavy, and it's good to be without it.
Good. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. So you and I met before you joined Vivacity.
Yeah.
And then we posted this job for a technical product manager. You applied. Just curious about what attracted you to Vivacity, and do you remember when we first met?
Yeah, I think I do. I think you and I first met virtually at an event that I was helping put together when I was still working at TRU in the research department. And it was around looking at the climate action plan in Kamloops and trying to come up with ways where the industry and researchers could come together to maybe co-create some solutions, or at least get the ball rolling in terms of a conversation. And I remember distinctly from that day, I was very sick and I probably looked very disheveled, but I was there filling in and trying to help out. And then I saw you and I was immediately very scared. I remember that vividly because you had your standing desk and you were sitting there with like your high color, I think it's a jacket that you own or something, and you just looked so serious. And you were asking very pertinent questions with a very serious face, and that was very intimidating at the time. So that was my first impression. What was the second part of that?
Well, I firstly apologize for being stern and
no, it was good. It was respect-inducing.
Good. And then, my question was around what interested you about working at Vivacity and the position itself?
Yeah. So at the time, I was working at TRU, and I knew that wasn't long-term what I wanted to do. I wanted to, go out on a limb and try something in my field. And I did enjoy the city. It's not easy to move to a different country and have to rebuild all of your networks in your community. And I definitely don't want to hold myself to this sort of comfort zone, long term. But having an opportunity to show up in Kamloops had a ton of value. And throughout my whole career, and ever since I started working from a very early age, I knew that I didn't enjoy being boxed into any one of the aspects of delivering something of value and being compensated in return for it, as it pertains to software specifically. And so the idea of going into product was really appealing to me. And it was, to be frank, at the time, something that I was looking at, okay, how can I work towards this over the next few years? And I was starting to send some resumes at that time. And one day, before I had even sent very many resumes at all, I wasn't even looking at LinkedIn. I wasn't terribly serious about the job search. I get an email on my phone where LinkedIn just bugs you, hey, please open my app. Here's what your network is sharing or whatever. And the first post was Vivacity Technologies is looking for a product manager. And I was like, oh, that sounds like something maybe of interest. Let's see what they're all about. And there was some mention of it being in Kamloops. I was like, there's no way. This is a scam for sure. But yeah, I open it up and I look at the listing. I'm like, oh, this sounds interesting. So the next day I open it up and then I start adjusting my resume and trying to, tailor it. It's like, hey, let's, do all I can to see if I can get in a room with these people. And yeah, I guess, after going through the process and being selected, the rest is history.
Nice.
So, yeah.
And how long have you been now at Vivacity?
I think it's getting close to 2 years, a bit over a year and a half now, actually.
Yeah,
a little too optimistic there.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
So your probation ends pretty soon. How do you think the next little bit's going to go?
There's a probation involved. You didn't know about that. Does that mean I start getting paid now?
Fine print, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the first paycheck's on its way, don't you worry.
Oh man, finally. I've been starving for the last 4 months. This is hard.
Fresh out of university,
Yeah.
corporate world. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Does it suck as bad as some people think it does, or is it okay? And would you do things any differently?
From a corporate world in general? Yeah. I think, so I have limited experience because Vivacity is my first stint in the corporate world, so to speak. But I do feel like we do things very different from at least the way I expect other companies to conduct themselves, especially larger companies. And what I mean by that is, at Vivacity, we get to really sit down and think about kind of the big picture of the projects that we do, how we would like to impact the community, and generally we have a very good shared understanding of the things that we do should ideally have a soul, right? There should be a reasoning behind these projects that actually makes us feel warm and fuzzy inside and, is adding value to something that we do deeply care about. And it's not just about getting up another day, getting another paycheck, buying your groceries again, and just that rinse and repeat cycle. And that's the part that really deterred me initially from going down the industry path, is thinking of this kind of cycle of doing things but not necessarily feeling like I have a lot of meaning or impact as a whole in terms of the outputs of my organization to the world. And yeah, I guess working with Vivacity, does it suck? No. It's a ton of fun. I think that there's a lot of areas. There's definitely parts of what we do on the day-to-day that are a bit boring. Like sometimes you got to write long reports and stuff like that, and although I do enjoy writing, there is definitely an element of bureaucracy there that I would love for it to not be there, but I don't think that's possible, really. But yeah, I mean, I'd say it's not really that bad. I think it's about not hating the players, it's about hating the games. And so I have a ton of respect for the people that are working in these large organizations, especially working through, several of our clients, which are larger companies. People are good and they're motivated to do good. It's just sometimes they're restrained by constraints that we might not understand or might not be very valid, but they're constraints nonetheless. And there's an art of trying to do good within those constraints that I think I didn't appreciate fully before joining. So yeah, it's been a surprising journey, I'd say, in a positive way.